What makes one ready for adulthood? Good grades, finding yourself gossiping about town meeting, the ability to hold a conversation about the weather for longer than 5 minutes. Adulthood has been a shining specter, something I wish I could just jump right into since I was a child. It seemed to me that being labeled as adult would bring with it all the skills that made them seem altogether more prepared for life's trials. I remember being 6 years old, walking back from kindergarten with my mother, hearing from her about all the stressors that day had thrown at her. The document she was editing had used semicolons instead of commas, the invoice hadn't come through and promised, and that the banking site she used to convert euros to dollars had crashed for the 5th time that week. I listened quietly, studying the pock marks on the cobblestones below me. She reached a lull in her train of thought. I looked up and said, "Mom, I want to work in a cubicle when I'm older." The reliable monotony of a 9-to-5 office job seemed the perfect solution to avoiding all of my mother's job-related stress, and I wanted in. This desire has worked itself into every moment of my life since then. I wanted stability first and foremost, and was willing to disregard any other desire to achieve it. My whole school career, I only missed classes if I was sick. I thrived in the repetition of school and activities. Nothing was more important than being able to function at top capacity. Life, however, doesn't want you to function at top capacity. The unpredictability of these past few years has shown that my perfect, stable office job was unachievable. That dream was unimaginably fragile. But what part of me let me hold on to it that long? What fear did I have? What experiences was I avoiding? Coming to the end of this chapter of my life, the ultimate end of childhood, has caused me to question my actions up until this point. If I had acted differently, might I be more prepared for the unknowable nature of next year? I can't help but wonder, would I be better off if I had done all the stupid, reckless activities intrinsic to teenhood? Would I be less scared of the unknowable future, one that right now seems to have an infinite number of outcomes? I would know from experience what not to do. Is my maturity false because I never let myself be immature? How can I be ready for adulthood if I never let myself be foolish? It seems that every day I encounter, even the cashier at the food co-op, has some piece of advice for me regarding my future. Travel the world while you still can, earn as much money as possible, or delve immediately into academia. I thought I would know by now exactly what I wanted to do. I mean, I have been thinking about it since I was 6. That's 12 years. But the reality is, as much as I would like to have adulthood be the final reward for completing a list of requirements, it's really only as much of a milestone as you make it. Being labeled adult doesn't magically make you any more prepared for its challenges. The only guarantee is that time will pass, you'll get older, and all the things you do will inform the person you become. The inevitability of that is a comfort. I made it from 6 to 18 after all, despite wanting to skip all those years. I'll make it from 18 to 30, too, just by virtue of time. And if I end up in a cubicle, I end up in a cubicle. And I better be happy about it because I've wanted it since I was 6.
Last summer, I took up reading Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. The Alchemist follows a young Andalusian shepherd named Santiago along his travels. The novel combines a simple philosophy with excellent storytelling, making it both accessible and effective. But that's not why it's my favorite. While the novel focuses on multiple themes like the pursuit of one's dreams and a unity with nature, what I loved about it was the idea of omens. In the book, omens are signals that help guide Santiago during his journey. There are many omens in The Alchemist, some of which include a set of stones that encourage him to make his own decisions, a desert that leads him to his love interest, a pair of hawks that warn him of danger, and a scarab beetle that tells him he is close to achieving his goals. After reading The Alchemist, like Santiago, I began to search for omens present in my own life. I found many. They came to me in the form of pennies on sidewalks, my favorite song coming on in shuffle, rainbows after sun showers, and my lucky number 4. I saw them in the face of my twin sister when we'd go on our regular drives around the neighborhood, windows down and blasting Taylor Swift, so every bystander could hear us belt the lyrics to Love Story. I felt them when I would go for walks on the beach and an unexpected wave would come up past the waterline and soak the cuffs of my jeans. Or when a container of strawberries from the grocery store had one that was especially big and perfect. In truth, my fixations with omens didn't last forever. I had entirely forgotten about them until maybe the second week of my senior year at Buxton, when I was struggling to transition to a new environment. I had been walking along the familiar gravel path, surrounded by a beautifully orange Massachusetts fall, when a blue jay flew past my line of sight. It flew right up onto the branches of a Buxton apple tree, and when I looked at it, I knew I was looking at a personal omen. In literature, birds are often symbols of freedom, hope, and belonging. I can't really explain to you in words what exactly I felt while that bird and I looked at each other, but I somehow knew that it meant I was right where I was supposed to be. Since then, I have once again made the conscious effort to pay attention to the little things, to the omens, that I would normally dismiss as coincidence. 2 weeks ago, a domesticated pet pigeon wandered onto campus and made herself right at home with the people that I've grown to see as family. Flying from person to person, perching on people's heads and eating out of our hands. We named her Butternut Tony, or Tony for short. While the blue jay marked the start of my time at Buxton, I like to think of Tony as an omen that signifies the end, which is fitting because she was recently relocated to a pigeon sanctuary in Pittsfield. With this, I leave you with some advice. I encourage you to go and find the omens present in your own life and to cherish them. And if a pigeon lands on your head, welcome it with open arms and wash your hands after touching it. Salmonella is real.
During the winter months, when the ponds have frozen over and the birds have lost their song, my fingertips begin to blue and I am cold again. The sparrow has taken my sweetness south for winter to lands unfamiliar to me, but he promised to return when I feel the first beam of spring lay its warm kiss upon my cheek. With each passing winter day, the temperature progressively lowers and the unforgiving path beneath my feet begins to pool into the soles of my shoes. "You must keep going," chirps Mr. Sparrow. "I will be back soon." I'm not sure why, but I believe his promise to be true. He sends me off with these few words and little answer to why I must venture out alone. But nevertheless, I keep the sparrow's words heavy on my mind as I wander deeper into the forest. I spot a small forget-me-not growing from what used to be a mossy patch, but has now encapsulated itself in what seems like a dozen layers of ice. I approach the flower in disbelief and ever so gently run my hands over the petals. For the next few days, my mind ruminates over how the flower could possibly grow in such conditions. The thought is enough to keep me warm for a while. Curious thoughts like this continue to swarm around my cold body like bees to honey, such as wishing for a bird of prey to come scoop me up and carry me along with him, or the longing to see the woods the same way I had when I was a child. The greenery that once towered over me, letting the light pour in, turned to brittle branches so dense it seems the sky has been forgotten. But entertaining these starry-eyed ideas could only put the biting temperatures at bay for so long. And finally, the snow becomes too heavy to hold, and I feel the weight of an icy wind brush violently against me. In this moment, Mr. Sparrow reminds me that winter is not the only season, but one of 4, and I must not give up now, for I have already trekked this far through it. But without enough energy to take a single step further, a quiet sense of acceptance washes over me. Just as the last remaining coals of my internal furnace have burnt out, and I drape my head over a small mound of ice to rest, I hear the sound of distant birdsong circling around my head and all throughout the forest. I open my tired eyes to a large patch of forget-me-nots furrowing through the snow beneath me. In an instant, I'm reminded that even in the depths of winter, the sparrow will always return, and suddenly, it's spring.
For years, I've been going up and down stairs at least 2 steps at a time, and no one has asked why, not even family members. It all started back in grade school, the legendary age of showing off the most pointless feats the growing human body can achieve. Like jumping as high as you can under a door frame and seeing the highest point you can touch. I'm not ashamed to admit that my most unbreakable habit started out as a similarly pointless bragging right. It was during a time where I thought I needed a simple, noticeable trait to single-handedly define everything I was. And although I was never unathletic, there was a lot of competition there, and being one of the smart kids was, frankly, out of the question. So I settled on being a tall kid, which for some reason was acknowledged as equally valid and defining as intelligence or athleticism. Kids are weird that way, aren't they? I needed every chance to assert that I was tall, because I thought that was the only thing keeping me from being nobody. And in this pursuit, I came upon that eventful moment. I was on my way back from gym class, and I wanted to make it seem like I was so tall it was more comfortable for me to go 2 steps at a time, which I thought would be really impressive. So while I was going up the stairs, I told one of my classmates, "My legs are so long, it's more comfortable for me to go 2 steps at a time." Clearly, I hadn't mastered subtlety yet. Or honesty either, I suppose, considering it most certainly was not more comfortable. Not for grade school me, at least. I committed to it regardless, though. All for bragging rights that, in hindsight, I don't think anyone cared about. Now, of course, I grew out of that check out what I can do culture over time, but I kept on going up and down stairs, 2 steps or more at a time, just out of habit. By late middle school, I had been struggling with school for years, and I hated myself for it. There would be times where I wished I just didn't care. That I was one of those kids who preached school is a prison and seemed almost proud when they did bad. That just wasn't me. I wanted to do well, and that made it every bit more painful because I really suck at school. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so genuinely bad at this. How am I graduating? Sorry for the digression, but as you can probably tell, those feelings never went away. You see, I've always struggled sticking with anything, even starting things. An inability to keep consistent focus on work means 30-minute workloads can take as much as mind-numbing hours for me. And at a certain point, I became too scared to even try to start. Nothing became easy. Everything became terrifying. There was one day in particular where I was in science class and I got this skull-splitting headache. I felt a terribly sharp pain whenever my head moved. But it was the last class of the day, so I decided to just stick it out and try not to move. But my science class was on the 3rd floor of the school, so I had to go down 2 flights of stairs on my way out. Out of instinct, I started going down the steps 2 at a time. But the impact of each long step hurt, like someone was playing pinball in my head. And naturally, I thought to myself, what am I doing? Forget that dumb habit and just take small steps. It has to hurt less. So I did, and I was right. It hurt a good deal less. But after just a few short steps, I felt empty. Logically, of course, the feeling was far less taxing than the pain I was in. And yet, the next thing I knew, I was back to 2 steps at a time. I remember whispering bits of motivation to myself until I made it down. This all brings me back to the start of this speech. I've never explained why I go up and down steps 2 or more at a time. The reason is because I can. I know. For all the build-up, that's a pretty disappointing answer. But it's a big deal. For me, at least. Because there's been a lot I haven't been able to do. Things I've been too afraid to start or even try to start. things I've been too afraid to continue or even finish. Work, relationships, routines, adventures, you name it. But no matter how many times I'm paralyzed by anxiety, I'll never hesitate to skip a step. And every time I do, I remind myself that I'm capable of sticking with something, even if it's just some silly, pointless habit I came up with in grade school for some silly, pointless reason, because that's enough. Now, this all might still sound kind of depressing, and well, I am depressed, so I guess that checks out. But even if I'm miserable in the moment, know that I'm glad to be alive. And as long as I'm going up and down steps, 2 or more at a time, even if I'm running away from everything else in my life, at that moment, know that I haven't given up.
Eight beginnings and an ending. One is June 11th, 2022. I just walked up to the podium. I'm the 5th person to come up to give a speech. I open my mouth. I speak of connections, memory, experience. 2, one thing that is inescapable when leaving a place where you've spent such a large portion of your life is memory. The first memories, the last memories, and the infinitely small subdivisions of collective experiences that weave those 2 points together. The stuff that makes up you as a person, both shapes your present and lets you embrace the future. 3, under the beating sun, I move my luggage from my car into the first room I will ever have at Buxton. 4, there is, I believe, an importance to having spaces that you can turn to. Whether it be your room, the arts building, or the kitchen, having a place in which you can feel comfortable and safe allows you to enjoy, to a larger extent, the wider community that you exist in. For me this year, that space was the trails in the back of Buxton. Each day, after classes, I would turn on an album and go for a walk. This time became a refuge that I would escape into when 5. On those cool nights in which I couldn't seem to shake the thoughts that would rush through my mind, I would escape to Pine Cobble Field and watch the stars for hours at a time. 6, I'll be the first to admit that it was quite hard for me to obtain my footing here at Buxton. Due to a combination of mental and physical health, as well as the COVID pandemic, my time here has been turbulent. My ability to make connections with those in the community has thus been strongly hindered. However, through effort and time, I slowly began to gain my balance. Each year, I made progress, slowly carving out a place where I could exist, culminating in this year. 7, the sun is shining, viscous and bright through magnolia blossoms. I take a deep breath. 8, for much of my life, art has taken a passive role in my existence. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the time I spent creating and expressing myself, but I never took a truly active position when making art. That is, until I came to Buxton. Slowly but progressively, over my time here, the creation of art of all different mediums became an active part of my life, something I would seek out rather than have passively happen to me, something I would look forward to. Ending. What does it mean to begin? What does it mean to end? I've been a student at Buxton for 4 years, and throughout my time here, I've had many false starts. At the beginning of each school year, I would start strong, trying to keep up with classes and the community, and each year I would stumble and be unable to persevere through its entirety. However, this year, I finally did it. I had a true start and kept it up the entire year. Now, it's time for an ending.
I never thought I'd have so much in common with a 77-year-old rancher living in middle of nowhere, Montana. About a year ago, I interviewed Sharon Wilson at her house in Bear Springs, a secluded part of Lost Prairie, for a feature piece in my school's newspaper. Our conversation started in her living room. We sat in armchairs by her big picture window, which overlooked a hay meadow rimmed by trees. From there, she has seen wolves crossing in packs of 5, and in the winter months, she has counted up to 90 elk passing through. Like most ranchers, Sharon felt deeply connected to her land. However, just a few years earlier, she had left it all behind to experience a new way of life. She and her husband moved to Petersburg, Alaska to join a fishing community. Other houses obstructed her view of the water, but she remembered catching glimpses of whales passing by through the spaces between them. As a member of a Foreign Service family, I'm very familiar with having to start over in a new setting. When Sharon spoke with pride about feeling as though she had become a part of the Petersburg community, telling stories over shared meals, and playing card games with locals, I reflected on all the times I, too, had found that home away from home among the people and objects that were once so new and foreign. But Sharon longed for the vegetables that just refused to grow in Alaskan soil and for her place by her big picture window where she could watch wildlife, and eventually found her way back to the prairie. We moved into Sharon's kitchen, and she started cutting up a head of garden-grown cabbage, expertly rocking a round blade back and forth. She explained to me that it was an ulu knife that members of the Alaskan Inuit community had showed her how to use. As a tool for preparing fish, it was key to their survival for thousands of years in the Arctic Circle. And here, back in her Montana kitchen, Sharon puts it to daily use, as if she'd been using it her whole life. Like Sharon returning to her home on the prairie, I'm heading back to Virginia for college this fall. Now, I might not have a special Alaskan knife, but I too have objects that continue to travel with me as I move from place to place. One is a nesting doll that I picked up at an airport gift shop in Kyiv, Ukraine. I was drawn to her, maybe because of her expression, cheerful but eerie, or maybe because I grew up loving the one-of-a-kind handmade things my Mexican grandmother did. Maybe I added that doll to my collection because she reminds me of something I saw so clearly in Sharon and see more and more in myself. Like nesting dolls, we collect layers of experiences that make us who we are, layers of the places we've been, the people we've met, and the stories we've collected along the way.
There are many places where people find their true selves. My special place was the floor on the right corner of the kitchen, hidden behind the chef's desk, place where I used to hide and cry or laugh and relax, listening to the overplayed but always appreciated 70s and 80s music. This is the music that I used to listen to with my dad on car rides, music that makes me feel calm, but at the same time cheerful, the only music I like. I can see the little black speaker on the shelf on top of the deep metallic sink, and I can hear a man singing in the background with a surprisingly graceful voice. The sound of a metal whisk scratching on a large mixing bowl. I can hear the high-pitched sound of the oven timer going off, forgotten by everyone. I am sitting here. My back is laying against a heat pipe that's keeping me warm during the cold winter day. The smell of freshly baked cookies fills up my nostrils. I hear footsteps approaching in my direction. I was hoping nobody noticed me, but at the same time, I'm glad they found me. A deep, comforting voice speaks to me and asks how I'm doing. My blurry eyes don't allow me to see them, but their voice sounds very nice. This time is not like it always is. I'm not scared of letting my feelings out. I talk. In that little spot that could mean nothing to somebody else, I found everything. I found a family, I found passion, love, and someone who believes in me. Oh, and of course, I found food. The kitchen has been both shelter from meteors and home for love. It was the most unexpected place, but the perfect one. They taught me so many things, but the most important one is to believe in myself. Paxton has a lot of special places. Everyone has their own. And if you haven't found yours yet, just keep looking because it exists somewhere.
A couple of years ago, I started to realize that there were things in my life that at first I thought seemed irrelevant and to have no effect. But my lack of attention to these things was preventing me from meeting my goals without me even realizing. Eventually, I noticed how not getting things like proper rest and recovery was having a big effect on my workouts. When I started to pay attention to these things that at first seemed irrelevant, I started to notice effects I never would have expected. When I came to Buxton and had to start going to what they claim is a gym, I started to teach a few people the basic stuff that I first learned. They all started to make progress, but they made the same mistakes as I did by not paying attention to these little things that seem to be irrelevant. Say, for example, I would invite one of them to do yoga with me to help with recovery. They'd just look at me like I was crazy. Now, I'm not sure I successfully convinced them that everything does matter and everything does have an effect, even if it doesn't seem like it. But I do hope that when you all leave this ceremony, you will think about how every part of your life is connected. Every choice that you make has an effect on you, your environment, and your loved ones. So you might as well make the right choice. Now, before I go, if you are able to, please join me standing for a quick stretch. Now, let's start by putting your arms over your head and grabbing your left wrist with your right. Now, lean to the right and breathe in and out. Now, come back to the middle and reverse it by taking your right wrist with your left hand and lean to the left. Now, take a breath here and come back to the middle. Thank you.
The walk back from the Clark to Buxton campus. Trailing down with the rocks. It's gotten dark since I left, and now it's drizzling too. And though I am rushing to get back to the main, phone dead, don't know what I'm missing, a calm comes over me. I think I experienced a great change in my first month here and only realized it then in the woods. I don't think anyone I didn't know before would be able to see it because it was sort of self-contained. Just like now, but different, a way that's changing again, but none of you are going to see it. I'm walking back from the Clark to Buxton, holding hands in the dark, tugging someone along. I have so many memories like this, at least 2 for each year here, and none too positive. But it's that tactile feeling of hands gripping, where I'm in the place I like best with people I've invited, an intimate invitation and an unfair test. The tactile feeling, push and pull, while I come down from the arts building hill, come down from the soccer field, come up from the driveway. I walk back to Buxton, coming down from the Clark, after seeing something I'll only see once up there, and I meet and appreciate the safe redundancy of mowed grass in the classroom sprawl, when I've spent too much time trying to re-find a certain tree or old man or something I dropped while coming down from a blind excitement. A push to look for things that hold no weight to me until I go back, think it over, and recount that trance.
I remember the first day of first grade with the same clarity as looking through an open window. I remember lining up in a single file with my classmates and walking with a senior as we made our way across the grass, him handing me a flower and parting ways as Mr. Kilb, my teacher for the next 8 years, gestured for me to sit. That was the beginning of face paint and fairy houses, long division and contra dances, Greek gods and flower crowns. It ignited my love of art, my love of history, my love of buildings. We built an Iroquois longhouse, and here I am 10 years later going into preservation carpentry. That's what I call character development, if I ever did see it. But after 8 years, I realized that I needed to find a new school, a new adventure. I needed to look through a new window. Oh my God, sorry, it's out of order. Fully embracing the choice to shake things up, I spent the next 3 years at a boarding school in New York. Now, of course, COVID hit right in the midst of sophomore year and turned my junior year into a Zoom calamity. I needed to keep moving. I needed more change, more opportunities, more adventure. I wanted to be proud to say that I was an alumni from somewhere. I wanted the words to taste like honeysuckle. I wanted to be at a really boring tax-themed party. I have no idea what adults do. And I wanted to talk about my school that none of these tax-exuberant adults knew of, because I'm just that proud of my school and my choices. Here I am today, tasting honeysuckle and dreading taxes, because I'm thrilled to say I am an alumni of Buxton. I am thrilled to have been a part of this community and its traditions. I even have a tattoo appointment right after this to get Live Your Education as knuckle tats. Only kidding. For me, Buxton has been everything and more. A choice I would never take back, a book I wouldn't put down, a boat I wouldn't dare leave. I've had the opportunity to seek discomfort and explore myself and my education so much further. I rekindled my love of writing, discovered I'm terrible at pressing the dryer start button, found an ardent appreciation in mopping, and actually enjoyed math class. Buxton has been quintessential with that final push into tax-loving adulthood, supporting me in my convoluted plans and patterns, showing me the endless possibilities that I am capable of pursuing, enlightening more and more facets of myself, making my senior year the most fruitful, fluid, and colorful year of the past 18. Tonight, I'm climbing out of my dorm room window with a plan, a can of cranberry juice, and my diploma. What else does one need?
I bought my first pair of Jordans the summer after my freshman year of high school. I had become obsessed with trying to find a good pair of sneakers, and for months I was drooling over the Jordan 1 Chicago, a classic red and white leather basketball shoe that was originally released in 1985. I had seen the shoes almost my entire life in old skate films from the 80s, being worn by skaters like Tony Hawk and Lance Mountain. They were re-released the spring of my freshman year, and I knew that I had to get them. Early that summer, I began working as a dishwasher at a local pizza restaurant, and after 2 weeks, I got my first paycheck of the summer, $270. Less than a day later, I went behind my mom's back with the money and spent nearly all of it on my first pair of Jordans. She found out a few days later and was furious that I spent so much of my paycheck on shoes. Before they arrived, I had some doubts about spending so much on shoes that would just end up being worn through the mud. Then the shoes arrived. They were beautiful, brand spanking new with buttery red and white tumbled leather. They felt like something had changed in me after I got them. I became absolutely infatuated with them. A new confidence draped over me like a majestic cloak while I wore them. In the beginning, I would take them off while working in the dish pit or going on hikes outdoors, but after a couple of months, I just began to live in them. I'd put them on in the morning when I woke up, and I'd wear them all day long, only taking them off late at night, put them on my shelf next to my bed so I could see them when I woke up. I would get recognition for them by strangers in the street almost daily, and by the end of my sophomore year, they had pretty much become a part of my identity and my confidence. My lucky shoes, the shoes I did everything in. From my first kiss to soccer practice, I was always wearing these shoes no matter the scenario or weather. When it came to Buxton, I saw how people expressed their individuality through their style. I cut up 2 pairs of my own shoes and sewed mismatched pieces back on, sanding and repainting the stiff, water-damaged leather to create whole new shoes. I kept exploring different ways to personalize my mass-produced shoes with paint or patches, but there's always this dream lingering in the back of my head to make my own sneakers. It seemed like an unreachable goal, but for a solid year, I gathered every tip and piece of information I could from different shoemakers and videos online. I would lie in bed, picturing myself making shoes before dozing off, and every single time I saw a shooting star, I said in my head, I'm going to make shoes soon. Last winter, I contacted a cobbler from South Korea to get a package put together of all the patterns and inner materials I needed. To afford it, I sold a pair of shoes that I had altered online and immediately sent the money to South Korea. In return, a heavy box showed up a month and a half later on campus. I suddenly felt underprepared for this scary project, but I got to work cutting the patterns out piece by piece with a step-by-step YouTube video, as well as Lola's help fixing my busted sewing machine. I was able to sew and construct my first pair within 2 weeks, and after the first pair, there was no stopping for me. For a solid month, the only reason I would get out of bed was to sew shoes. After class, from 3 in the afternoon to 3 in the morning, most nights I would sit at my desk sewing. I found the construction cathartic. There was a comforting sense of routine. Cut leather, punch holes, paint leather, glue pieces, sew pieces, repeat. The second pair I made recreated those first red and white Chicagos. I took apart the pair of shoes I bought all those years ago, putting the original sole on the fresh new pair in order to keep the sentimental look. I bought my first pair of Jordans and a cloak of confidence came with them. Now I've gotten to the point where I'm able to sew and construct that cloak on my own.
Fun fact, the average person will spend 6 months of their life waiting for the red light to turn green. When I first heard this fact, I went, that's kind of crazy, and went about my day. Nothing too mind-shattering at first, but for some reason, it just kept circling around in my head. 6 months. 6 months. 6 months isn't that long when compared to someone's whole life, but to spend it waiting at a red light? Anyway, at some point, this fun fact got me spiraling down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out how much time I've spent in my life doing certain things, from how long I've spent watching my favorite movies to how long I've spent sitting in an actual school building. I won't bore you with all the math and such, but just know that I've spent about 35 days watching the Lord of the Rings movies. Anyway, at some point, I thought to myself, what takes up most of our time? Sleep. Let me give you an example. There's a person. They just turned 50. 50 years. That's a lot, right? Let's say this made-up person slept the recommended 8 hours every night. Out of their 50 years of living, they were asleep for a little under 17. Pretty solid nap. That would mean that this person would have only been awake for 33 years. For anyone who happens to be 50, I apologize for turning you into a millennial just now, but all joking aside, if I'm completely honest, that scares me a little. Don't worry about it. You're young. You've got plenty of time. I'm sure everyone's heard this at least some point growing up. I know I did. A lot. And when someone much older than you tells you something like that, of course you're going to believe them. Why wouldn't you? And it makes so much sense. The average person lives to be around 80, so from the perspective of a 12-year-old, that's tons of time. More than they know what to do with. Growing up, the one thing I thought I had the most of, without a doubt, was time. But I've come to realize that time is something we will never have enough of. I still remember in elementary school when they told us the year we would graduate. 2022. It seems so far away. I remember thinking, I can't wait to graduate. Or I wish time would go faster. Well, I guess my wish came true. It feels like just yesterday I was ripping Beyblades into the dirt by that huge tree on the playground. It feels like just yesterday I was sliding down one of those metal slides that got hotter than the surface of the sun. It feels like just yesterday I was complaining to my teacher that I swore I saw my meatloaf breathe. It feels like yesterday, but it's today. And today I'm standing here in front of all of you, giving this speech, about to graduate. About to go off into life, blindfolded with my hands tied behind my back. I think that's the reason I've been so fixated on time. Because I feel that by the time I take off that blindfold, life will have already passed me by.
In her early 20s, my mother was a songwriter. I grew up learning those melodies and lyrics and continuously singing them. There is a particular lyric from a specific song that has stuck with me. We can love and still be free. To which I say, can we? Does the act of love free you, or does it trap you and hold you hostage? I am not referring to the act of loving a living thing, but rather a place. Is my love for Buxton accompanied by freedom? At the age of 14, I did not love Albany. I had a disdain for it and was eager to leave. In hindsight, this disdain hindered my ability to love myself and to be a fully self-actualized person. I harbored hatred for myself that was disguised as hatred for my hometown. When I came to Buxton, I fell in love with the campus, the people, and the school itself. This love freed me from my own self-hatred, and I began to love myself. After all, loving who you are and where you are inextricably bound. So yes, to love is to be free. There is another reflection on love from the movie Lady Bird that I often think about. In reading Lady Bird's essay on Sacramento, her teacher exclaims that she clearly loves Sacramento. She replies, "I think I just pay attention." Her teacher responds, "But isn't that the same thing?" I like to consider myself a particularly observant person. I am equal parts participant and onlooker when I'm at Buxton. During meals, for example, I listen to the shrieks of my peers, and I see my friends as they retell a story that is layered with inside jokes only Buxton kids could understand. I pay attention to Buxton, and with each observation, does my love solidify? Yes. We prioritize the things we care for and disregard and forget about the things we don't. To love is to pay attention. To pay attention is to love. The final musing on love is a cliche we often say to comfort ourselves. If you love something, set it free. I don't buy that one. My love for Buxton has positioned me in a place where I will hold on tight. The memories, the experiences, and the affection I have for Buxton are etched permanently in my brain. But as I hold on to Buxton, my relationship with it and my love for it will change. It will not stay stagnant. Buxton will move through many iterations, and I will move through many phases of my life, but neither of us will fully move on. We both leave imprints on the other. Although the imprints may fade, they will not be forgotten, and they will not disappear.
There is no point in trying to top a Buxton senior's graduation speech, let alone 13 of them. Buxton seniors are some of the most self-aware, eloquent, amazing young adults you will ever meet, and this group just proved that again over and over. We're here to celebrate them, to celebrate their achievements at Buxton, whether they were here for 1 year or 2 or 3 or 4. To celebrate whatever they'll do next, immediately, but also well into the future. But most of all, to celebrate them for being themselves, for being exactly who they are, and for sharing that with us. Getting to teach at Buxton also means getting to learn at Buxton. Real education is a two-way street. I learned so much from the seniors today, as all of us do every day that we get to work and teach and live in this community. I hesitate then to offer anything to the seniors today other than their diplomas, because our role right now is to listen and learn from them. But teacher habits die hard, so I will offer one final lesson. Every year I hear people talk about the real world. Students who are wondering what they'll do in the real world. People outside of the school who ask us, how do you prepare people for the real world? Even us teachers and parents who might, in a moment of exasperation, demand, you need to know this for the real world. But here's the secret, here's the truth. You were in the real world all along. This is the real world. It always was. The real world doesn't start when you get a job, and many of you have had many jobs already anyway. The real world doesn't start when you first fall in love with someone or something, and many of you have done that already too. The real world doesn't start when you suffer a major loss or setback, and I am sorry to say that your age hasn't shielded you from that either. Before you came to Buxton, and certainly while you've been at Buxton, you have been working and loving and losing and creating and building and sharing this whole time. And that's all the so-called real world is, really. There's a line from a early English poem, it's over 1,000 years old, and it goes, whoever remains for long here in this earthly life will enjoy and endure more than enough. Will enjoy more than enough. Will endure more than enough. That was true then, and it's true now. It's felt very true these last few years. For you, for us, for the whole world. You've endured so much, and you've come through it. You've enjoyed so much, and you will continue to here in this earthly life, here in the real world, here at Buxton. So you may have been told, you may have even said it yourself, that now you're headed into the real world, but you've been in the real world all along, and it is so much better because you're in it. The class of 2022. Charlotte Bull. Sam Leo Kincaid. Rosa Grace Henderson. George X. Dawson. Ty Bjork. Elsa Ren Yera Jones. Martina Lazzarini. Ian Francis Foster. Olive Lyons. Shantae Rose Melville.